RI Academy Podcast One Student, One Creativity.
Hello everyone, welcome back to RI Academy Podcast One Student, One Creativity and Literature in the Autumn course. My name is Rifky, and in this podcast we usually talk about literature, language learning, and also global issues that are still closely connected to our daily lives. Sometimes, when we hear the word literature, we might imagine old stories that only talk about the past. But actually, many literary works still speak very clearly to the problem we face today. But actually, and that's exactly what we will discuss in this today's episode. Today, we're going to explore one of Indonesian classic novels, Kemarau, written by A.A. Nevis, aka Ali Akbar Nevis. This novel tells about a story about a village experiencing a long and difficult drought, but the story is not only about weather or natural condition. It also shows how environmental problems affect people's emotion, relationship, and decision. In this episode, we will analyze the novel using a learning approach called reader response strategy. This strategy encourages students to actively respond to a literary novel text through 4 stages: 1. Describing, and 2. Interpreting, 3. Explaining, and the last one, considering. Through these stages, students don't just read the story passively, but instead they engage with the text, think critically, and connect the story with real-world issues. And of course, I'm not discussing this topic alone. I'm joined by a guest today. Her name is Tasya. Welcome to the podcast, Tasya.
Hello, Ricky, and hello to everyone listening. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to join this discussion because I think literature can be a very powerful way to talk about our environmentation. Sometimes scientific explanation can feel very distant, but when we see environmental problems through a story, it becomes more personal and emotional.
That's a very good point. So stories allow us to experience problems from a human perspective, and that's exactly what happened in this novel. Alright, let's start our discussion with the first stage of the reader response strategies. The first stage is describing, and this stage reader focus on the surface of the story. They observe the setting, the environment, the characters, and the situation described by the author. So Tasya, when you first read Kemarau, what kind of atmosphere did you imagine?
The atmosphere feels very dry and dense. The novel is from a village where the land becomes extremely dry because of long drought. The soil cracks, crops cannot grow properly, and water becomes very scarce. And this situation makes our daily life very difficult to work for the villagers.
So the environment really dominates the story.
Yes, absolutely. And what I found interesting is that the author describes the drought in a very vivid ways. Because readers can almost imagine a dry land, the hot water, and the villagers struggling to survive.
That kind of description really helps readers visualize the situation, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why the describing stage is important in our language learning. When students read descriptive texts like this, they develop several abilities. The first one, they can understand the detailed description, and also they learn about the vocabulary and also can imagine scenes in the story. These skills are essential for improving reading comprehension.
So describing is not just summarizing the story. It's really about observing carefully what the author is presenting.
Yes, and students can learn to pay attention to small details, and those details often lead to deeper understanding later on.
Okay, after describing the story, we move to the second stage, which is interpreting. This stage asks reader to go deeper. Instead of only asking what happened, readers start asking why it happens and what it means. So Tasya, in your interpretation, what does the drought symbol in this novel?
In my opinion, the drought represents more than just a natural disaster. It also symbolizes a broader crisis. For example, our environmental stability, also our social struggles, and also the emotional hardship we will be going through. Growth forces the villagers to confront uncertainty and fear of their future later on.
That's interesting. So the drought becomes a metaphor for larger challenge.
Yes, and when we connect it to today's world, it becomes very relevant. Today, we can often hear discussion about climate change. Many regions in the world experience extreme drought, water shortages, and environmental degradation. So even though the novel was written many years ago, the situation described in the story feels very familiar to me.
That's what makes literature timeless. It reflects patterns in human life that repeat across generations.
Exactly. And this is where students begin to develop their critical thinking. They might start asking questions like, why did the author choose this setting, or what message might the author be sending, or how does this story relate to our real life situations?
And those questions move the discussion beyond simple reading. Okay, now we move to the third stage, explaining. And this stage, readers explain their interpretation and provide reason to support their ideas. So, Tasya, how would you explain the connection between the group in the novel and climate change today?
So, the novel clearly shows how environmental problems can affect varying aspects of human life. When water becomes scarce, many other problems appear. For example, farmers cannot grow crops, food production decreases, and also our communities experience economic hardship. And these consequences are very similar to the effects of climate change today.
That's true. So climate change is not only about temperature change, it also affects nature, agriculture, food security, and human livelihood.
Yes, and literature helps our students understand these impacts emotionally, not just on the intellectually. When students read about their characters' experience in growth, they begin to empathize with those situations.
Okay, so literature makes global problem feel more real.
Yeah, exactly. And when students explain their interpretation, they also practice important language skills. For example, speaking during discussion and writing analytical responses, and also they can expressing their opinions clearly.
Okay, finally, we reach the last stage, which is conceiving. This stage encourages readers to think critically about possible solution. So, Tasya, what kind of ideas might students develop after reading this novel?
Students might start imagining solutions to environmental problems. For example, improving water conservation, or they can promote environmental awareness and encouraging the people to do sustainable agriculture practices.
Okay, so the story inspires readers to think about the future.
Yes, absolutely. It encourages them to imagine how communities can respond to environmental challenges more responsibly.
So to summarize, today's discussion, through the novel Kemarau and the reader's personal strategy, students can develop four essential language skills. 1. Reading, 2. Listening, 3. Speaking, and 4. Writing. At the same time, they also build important 21st century competencies such as critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration.
Yeah, and perhaps the most important lesson that literature helps us reflect real issues in our world today, especially environmental challenges like climate change.
Exactly. So in the end, Kemarau is not only a literary work, it also a reflection of human experience and environmental realities. Thank you so much, Tasya, for joining us in this discussion today.
Thank you. Very thankful for you to join this discussion today. It was a very meaningful discussion.
Okay. And for everyone listening, keep reading, keep thinking, and stay curious. See you in the next episode of Academy Podcast. One student, one creativity, and literature dengan people. Bye everyone.
RI Academy Podcast, One Student, One Creativity.